All right, I believe we have a quorum for the Cunningham Township Board, so I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Cunningham Town Board for Monday, November 1st, 2021. Will clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Here.
Mr. Evans,
Here.
Ms. Hersey, Ms. Colasetti, Ms.
Here.
Bishop.
Here.
Okay. Ms. Wilkin,
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry, Mayor Marlin,
Here.
Ms. Shenoweth, Mr. Williams.
Here.
Thank you.
And Board Member Colasetti is here as well.
Okay.
We have one item of business tonight. It's for resolution number T 2021-11-014R, a resolution authorizing the Cunningham Township Assessor to sign a contract with Pictometry International Corporation for orthogonal and oblique imaging. Wayne?
This resolution is to authorize me, the Cunningham Township Assessor, to sign a contract with Pictometry for another aerial photography flight. We got a flight last year, and basically I'm asking you guys to do this contract for an annual update. As you know, there's been a lot of building in Urbana over the last year, and I can't stress how invaluable this imagery is to my office. But not only is it valuable to my office, since we've got the imagery last year, we've also shared it with several departments at the city of Urbana, specifically the building department and the planning division. I spoke with Nick Hansen today. They actually just got access to the imagery over the last week, and he's finding it very useful. But he and his staff are still exploring it. I talked to Kevin Garcia, also in the planning department. They use the software every day. He told me they like the fact that it allows them to measure building heights and wall areas, which is not possible using the standard aerial imagery from GIS. Eagle View allows them to do things that would be extremely time consuming and requires site visits otherwise. And he also mentioned that having up-to-date imagery is always useful, and so is historical imagery, that they often need to see current imagery and compare it to past imagery. So it's his opinion that an annual update would be very useful to him in the planning department. And so I ask you that you approve this resolution, and I am here for any questions you may have.
Technical questions for Wayne. Mary Alice.
Hey, Wayne. I remember when you originally brought this to us about, I think it was 2 years ago. Was that the first flight?
Yeah.
So 2 years ago, you brought it to us, and I thought at that time we had discussed the kind of cadence in terms of how frequently it would be done. And for some reason, I was thinking it was 4 years. That was the cadence, and that last year was a one-off because of the funding that we had available. I think it was through the Cures Act, so that more people would have to go out. Is that the cadence that we talked about 2 years ago?
I don't know that we got very specific into the cadence. I know we talked about how the Champaign County GIS Consortium does their flight every 3 years. City of Champaign, they actually do flights in between the GIS flights. So I don't remember specifically what we talked about. It was a once-off a couple years ago because of the extra funding. This one is also a once-off. I've had some unforeseen staffing issues, and so because of that, I have one person that's going to be leaving, and instead of hiring someone over the winter when we can't really do field work like we would normally do, I'm going to push that hire off, but use the savings for this.
So I think that we had also talked about the city was going to grant you access to their building permits. Did that ever happen?
Yes. I pay for it, so it's not, I have to pay the the city uses a private company, and then so they charge the city for every user.
Yeah. Right. So I'm just trying to figure out. So I mean, building happens. It's not something that there's a ton of building that happens. There are lots of changes to like an individual's house, right? I know that one of the purposes that you go out and you check to see if somebody has, made their deck larger or, changes to existing structures, right? And so my understanding was that that was the primary purpose of the use of this data. But new buildings, we have all the plans and everything. So in terms of the height and how many rooms and how many bedrooms and all that stuff that you use to calculate your assessment, that's stuff that we already have, right?
Well, we have plans, but not everything is built according to the plans. So we don't base our work just off of building plans. We always go back and look at things ourselves, either in person or like this. Over this past year, we used the pictometry software quite a bit to do that.
Yeah, I guess my concern really is about the cadence. I mean, it's about $40,000 to do it every year, if that is the proposal to do this every year. And so that's my major concern is what is the cadence that we should be doing this at? And I don't know if every year we will have enough changes to say that it's worth $40,000 to do that, but that's just my opinion. And I wanted to give the council members a little bit of background in terms of how this originally came to us 2 years ago, was to help Wayne do some of these measurements and so forth. And then we had an update last year as well.
Well, again, I just would like to add that it's not just my office is benefiting from the imagery. It is just my office paying for it, but that's just, we've had some unforeseen issues in the office that has freed up money to pay for this. So in a perfect world, we would be sharing this cost, but I'm not asking for that right now because I think it's more important to get access to the tool than to, hag over who pays for what right now.
And so can you remind me, this is a 1 inch, I think. So how
Sub
many,
1 inch.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's a sub 1 inch imagery.
And it takes pictures of everybody's houses from an angle. So you can, how I guess what I'm thinking about is privacy, right? Like how much can you see into people's houses and driveways and everything that they've got going on?
Well, we can't see into people's houses at all. It's not that detailed. You could read billboards, but you couldn't read like a house number.
And is there like a policy in terms of access to it? I know you have your office in the city. Do we have some kind of agreement with the city?
So the city just signs up. So the city, whenever a user is added, they abide by the same terms and conditions that we do with use of the imagery.
You mean the terms and conditions by the company, or
by the company?
All right, but we don't have any of our own like policy in terms of how the data can be used internally in the township or the city?
No.
Okay.
Are there any other technical questions? And I do want to acknowledge and apologize. I skipped over public participation. So I think we can finish up questions for Wayne, and then if, with your permission, we'll go back to public participation in case anyone in the public wants to weigh in on this topic.
I just wanted to let Ms. Clark know I'm here. I got in at 6:37.
Thank you. James, question?
Yeah, I have a question. So Wayne, we have the opportunity to do this because of some funding that's available this year, and there's a need because of changes that have occurred over the last year. If you're looking into next year, do you think we will need to do this again next year, or will we be able to take a break?
In a perfect world, it's something that we would do every year, but we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a budget constrained world. In a perfect world, the cost of this could be split between the township and the city. but I haven't started to have those discussions yet, and I won't for a couple months. I think it's more important. We have the ability to pay for this within our budget now, so I think it's more important than that, whether the haggle over who pays for what, to get the tools, to use the tools, because it doesn't cost us anything extra to share with the city, to share the tools and, figure out next year.
So you see so if we get it done this year, there's a possibility we might have to forego next year if budget is tight, but we might be able to work out an arrangement where they're splitting costs with the city.
I again, I haven't had those discussions with the city yet. The reason that I have the money in my budget this year, because it's not something I budgeted for when I proposed my budget. However, I've had unforeseen staff changes. And so I'm going to be moving money out of personnel through line item transfers to pay for this.
Okay, thank you.
Grace.
Thanks. I was wondering along the line of thoughts about sharing this imagery and what your thoughts are about drafting like rules or policy for using or sharing that kind of imagery. Do you think that would be possible, or what are your thoughts on that?
In terms of sharing it with other departments, or do you mean publicly, or what are you?
I mean, yeah, I guess all of it, like if we're going to be using and sharing images of, properties around town that might be a lot of them personal properties too, if there is, or we could draft some kind of general policy about, using it for official purposes and whatever that, might be in that for that entity.
I would not be opposed to drafting a policy. I just want to be clear. The reason that I asked for a special meeting is because I'm hoping to get this contract approved today, so I can sign it, and then we can have a flight done by the company. I have to get on their flight schedule, and the hope is if we can get this approved today, that I can sign and get in their schedule for the flight happening in this fall, so it'll be December actually. Otherwise, we'd have to wait until March before we could get another flight.
Do you think it could make sense to say approve going into the contract now and saying like before accessing the data or before getting the results in, whatever, then we have, just some kind of a loose policy about the intended and appropriate uses of that?
Sure.
I'm interested in if any other board members or anyone else has thoughts on that.
Any other comments?
Mine is not a comment. I guess now I'm going to save it until we get to the.
Okay. Any other questions for Wayne? Okay, then I'm going to move on to public participation. And then we'll get a motion on the floor for enabling discussion. I have one person, Alan Max Axelrod.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, please put up the clock if you could. Thank you. Alan Max Axelrod, Urbana resident, former intern of the Cunningham Township for a year, volunteered before that for roughly another year. I want to be very careful in how I phrase this. Please do not consider this an attack. I just don't want people being alarmed when I end up trying to remove myself from the Township Google Drive. I noticed while doing a security audit that I can literally see all the things in the activity logs. I don't think any of us want that. And so I just wanted to make very clear I'm going to remove myself. And if I'm not able to do that, please remove me. It's totally fine. I had sent tech tools to get estimates of community data and taught a previous intern on how to use those tech tools. So if you lose access to those, let me know. But I do not think that it's appropriate that I have access to those. I only realized it recently, and I didn't want anybody getting alarmed or saying something about me hacking or whatever, because that's actually been an allegation I've had to deal with before. So that's why I'm commenting. I know that that's probably has raised some blood pressure. And I just want to be very clear. This has been a very busy 2 years. I do not think that anybody should make a professional judgment based off the fact that this access has continued or anything like that. And now that we know about it, we can deal with it. So I apologize if I phrased that at all in a way that made people feel uneasy. I don't really know how to communicate about it. It was unexpected. So I'm sorry. Have a good night.
Okay. Sarah Nixon.
Sorry, I could not see the unmute button. Hi, this is Sarah Nixon. I'm just wanting to offer a comment because I happened to be here at this meeting because I didn't want to be late for the city council meeting. And I wanted to thank the council members who are raising concerns about Urbana residents' privacy rights. And it seems to me that there's, an unprecedented level of proposals to violate residents' privacy currently. And I don't know what this pictometry technology is. So obviously I can't cogently about it or to it. But I mean, if I, who sort of have my finger on the pulse of city meetings, am completely in the dark, I'm wondering about everybody else in Urbana. And it seems to me that something where people's properties are going to be photographed. And again, it's not clear to me what the data really will be, used for and how, but it seems to me that no one else in the city, like residents, have not been made aware of this question. And I think it would be reasonable and right to ask for their input, and also, of course, as some of you mentioned, have an actual policy in place. And I just quickly Googled Pictometry International Privacy, and it's referred to as a new visual intelligence system. And then there's also concerns about privacy laws and data, and does Pictometry International violate consumer data privacy rights by collecting, processing, and sharing consumer information? So I'll just leave it at that. I'm just trying to be a voice because I'm sure that the concern I'm voicing will be shared by many others, and I happen to be here. So thank you.
Okay. Next up is C. Please state your name.
Hi, this is Christopher Hansen. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hey, so yeah, I thought I'd say something about this pictometry thing too. I'm just a little confused why the township is wanting to spend $40-something thousand, $46,000 or whatever it was. I just always been under the impression that you guys had, better things to do with your money, helping people and stuff. It's not clear to me that you need this. and you're just basically taking high resolution photos of people's backyards. I don't understand it at all. I'm just kind of at a loss. You're talking about implementing some type of privacy policy. I mean, you can implement whatever you want, but that data is going to be accessible by everyone via FOIA. So I mean, you can't implement a policy that makes the FOIA law go away, because that's a state statute. So I mean, if you want to, continue to do regularly these high resolution, aerial photos of everyone's homes and then share that with the world, I don't understand what you're after here. I'm sure you can find something better to spend the money on. So, thanks.
Next up is Anita Chan.
Hi there. Is this semi-audible?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Hi, good evening. My name is Anita Chan, and I'm an associate professor in the School of Information Sciences at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. This is the first statement of this kind I've delivered to the city, and I was not anticipating to do so today. But after attending one of the town halls last week, I was compelled out of genuine concern to join you here. I teach on and research algorithmic systems and their social impacts. I also lead the Community Data Clinic at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications and the iSchool, and I'm a faculty affiliate of the Data and Society Institute. So I was surprised to hear a number of statements made about LPRs that contradicted the standard literature on automated information systems. The statements were misleading and left the public with a dangerously inaccurate impression of what LPRs are. For the purposes of time, I will raise just 3 clarifications. Firstly, it was explicitly stated at town halls that LPRs cannot pan, stream, or capture images of a driver, and that, quote, they are therefore not surveillance cameras. This is false. None of those criteria are necessary for surveillance systems to operate. All surveillance systems for law enforcement, whether a watchtower, electronic monitoring bracelets, or LPRs, enable routine monitoring and information tracking. The key difference with LPRs is that the vast majority of those residents being tracked have no previous connection to a crime. Furthermore, as researchers have shown, concentrating LPRs in minority neighborhoods amounts to greater surveillance and burden of suspicion placed on those residents. It is thus inaccurate to suggest that just because LPRs don't see faces or race, that they cannot racially profile. Secondly, it was repeated that all LPRs are, quote, just another tool, like a carpenter's speed square. But this is an irresponsible mischaracterization that mitigates their potential. LPRs are not simple tools, but are complex technological systems that permanently connect a neighborhood to law enforcement and then also to a remote third-party corporate processing center. Unlike other tools, they cannot be turned on and off. Once installed, they track information indiscriminately and at such a scale that it is entirely possible to not just track, but to identify a driver's routine activities, to infer and predict where they go for worship, for healthcare, and who their friends are. All this is possible to correlate without ever having to see a driver's face, and it is certainly possible to do with just a month's worth of stored data. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, it was stated various times that the city wants to take a very data-driven approach. But it was glaringly obvious that critical information was missing from the town halls. No mention was made, for instance, of the numerous communities across California, Arizona, Indiana, and New York, to name just a few, that have recently rejected or canceled LPR contracts, and no inquiry was made into why. This is in fact the first thing a colleague in engineering said to me when I mentioned the LPR town halls. He said, quote, they are canceling the use of those things in other areas. This should raise flags for the need for more earnest data collection and assessment by the city prior to investment. Indeed, here in Urbana, we have some of the strongest and most robust research capacities of anywhere in the state. This is an opportunity, as we are all part of Urbana's research community. And on an issue of such critical import that could change Urbana's architecture, the city should ensure that resources at the U of I, as well as off campus, are engaged for collaborative and transparent inquiry. Hearing city officials voice confident in Flock's product by citing the vendor's own self-assessment and reported numbers was heartbreaking. It does not indicate a serious assessment of a potential solution to a serious problem. Similarly, enumerating the neighboring cities in Illinois that are undertaking contracts with the same vendor is a grossly insufficient indicator of LPR efficacy. None of those communities have the kind of research capacity that exists here in Urbana. It might even be argued that we could or should be providing a service to our neighbors and the state by undertaking research of this kind that few others are positioned to do regionally. As I hope is clear, this is neither a plea for nor against LPRs. This is instead a request for more sound research and data collection around them and around Flock or any other potential LPR vendor. This is not a trivial decision, but is one that could be consequential to our neighbors near and far, and we owe it to them to be deliberate and thorough moving forward. Thank you.
Just a reminder to folks that this is the town board meeting with the agenda item on the orthogonal photography, but of course you're free to speak on any topic you want, but this will be followed by the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole. Next person with a hand raised is, oh, disappeared. Let me check the list. Okay. Looks like we have, everyone has completed their comments. All right, we'll move back to the business item at hand. Can we get a motion and a second to get this item up for discussion?
I'll move to approve resolution number T-2021-11-014R, resolution authorizing the Cunningham Township Assessor to sign a contract with Pictometry International Corps for orthogonal and oblique imaging.
Second.
Moved by Grace, seconded by James. Discussion. Mary Alice.
Yeah, I'd really like to see the township have a strategy on how the frequency of this to build this in. Right now, I mean, it's understandable that this came to town board last year because we didn't want people out in the streets, people walking up around people's yards and so forth. So this was a good solution at that time. But there's a lot of construction that's getting slated. And so I feel like we're going to be at the same spot next year. So I'd rather see a strategy in terms of what is the cadence that makes sense for this type of stuff. So because we have the past 2 years, I'm not in support of this at this time.
Any other comments? James.
Yeah, I do want to echo Mary Alice's point that we do need a strategy and a longer term cadence for how often we need to do this. But I have seen the tool, I have seen the value in it, how it can reduce the need for people to go out to do the beginning work on assessments. And so I think if I can see how an every 2 year or every 3 year cadence might be good, but sometimes you have to take the opportunity of funding to start your cadence. So I am going to be supportive of this.
Christopher.
Yeah, to echo some of the public input, Wayne, could you maybe list the uses of this imagery for the public so they know why you're doing this?
Yes. What I use it for is to measure houses and other real property within a township. I also use it to determine, so for example, let's say you replace your porch, right? And you do a permit, I'll get a permit after you take out a permit to replace your porch, right? And I'll see the permit, I'll look at the property record card, right? And they'll say, oh, well, this place already had a porch, but let's go out and look at it anyway, right? And sometimes the property record cards, they're not always correct. But if all you did was like tear the porch down and put up the very same type of porch, that's not going to be anything that I'm going to assess because all you basically did was fix your porch, right? But if there was something different about the construction of your porch, say you used a different material, say you used a different, say the measurements were different somehow, that's something that's a lot easier to see when you have imagery that can show you a before and after, right? So I use the software to measure property, but also to see a before and after. I also use it. So our evaluation date is January 1. And a lot of times um, we'll get our certificates of occupancy after January 1. But we still have to value what's there as of January 1. So being able to have imagery from the second week of December, it gives me an idea of what percentage complete a particular property would have been on January 1 if I don't get a permit until, say, March the following year, or the following January 1. And then also my Chief Deputy William Harris is here, and he's in the attendees. He has his hands up. He also uses it. He can probably speak more to it.
Can you elevate William to the panelist, please? Go ahead, William. You need to unmute.
Will, you're muted if you're talking.
Well, while we're trying to get Will to unmute, are there any other comments from?
I have a follow-up question.
Sure. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. Wayne, you said you share the imagery with other city departments. Do you know what they're doing with the imagery?
Yeah, so I kind of went over that. So I know the planning department uses it to measure building heights, and also to take area measurements that they otherwise wouldn't be able to take unless they went and did a site visit. The building department, Nick Hansen's department, they just got access to it, and I know they're using it. What they use it for exactly, I couldn't tell you, but they just got access, and I think they're still trying to look at the best uses. Both departments already use the Champaign County JS Consortium imagery, but that's just ortho or top-down imagery, whereas this is oblique imagery, which is from the side, so it has more uses.
Thank you.
And William, can you unmute now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I was trying to get in. Earlier when I guess it was a lot of questions coming up about privacy and the different things for the citizens. And when these flights are done, the company that pictometry itself, Eagle View, certain things are blurred out as these flights go by, because you got to understand they're not just doing it for like our township, they're doing it for the county and sometimes multiple counties at a time. Now, a lot of the benefits that come from the software are, there was a particular property that took a couple of years to build, and it was put on at one time as like being fully complete when it wasn't fully complete. So we were able to go back and say, oh no, it was this at this particular year, this at this particular year, even though there weren't 1 depth inch like flights. These flights are happening anyway. That's the easier way to kind of explain. It's kind of happening anywhere they're flying over, but our access to the data changes by us having the contract. So us now having access to the software to be able to say, hey, did this deck go from 10 feet to 20 feet? Without us having to step into your backyard or disturb you, your family, or any of those things. That's kind of the benefit of the software. Originally, the place I came before coming to Urbana, it was something where we did flights every year. So to speak to what Ms. Wu spoke of earlier, I guess, yeah, figuring out, okay, what's the best cadence to move at? But that's from looking at it in the perspective of, okay, this is what it costs us if we keep doing this on a year-by-year basis. But maybe if we set up a contract that was every 2 years, every 3 years, something where we now can one deal with the price in a different way, but also we can see what our gain of new construction is. How is it really helping towards permits? Is it influencing do the citizens like it better with us doing it that way than us knocking on your door at different times? Because with the Midwest having the winters it had, it's a lot of those times when we can get out into the field and we have the staff numbers when we're not working appeals, because like now it's appeal season for us, which means we're answering the complaints. Soon as the complaint season in, we're supposed to try to go out and view all these properties before January 1st. But even me being from another place, the few years I've been here, I've seen typically it's snow around that time. So it's putting the staff out in these kind of harsh conditions. So this is just a way right now for us to say, instead of hiring somebody else, instead of jumping through all these extra hoops trying to train them really, really fast, let's do something we know how to use real quick. Let's use this as that solution real quick, kind of wrap this in. I'm experienced in it. Wayne, everyone in the office could use it. If we had anyone come into our office, we could show you how to use it. But it's one of those things that if you're not specifically doing a job related to it, you wouldn't need it, if that makes sense. Somebody like a planner might need something like this because they're looking at the changes over time, just as we are. Someone like an officer, because then the reason I say like officer and firefighters, now if we did this on a yearly basis and they're getting the same imagery as us, they can know that behind the house, there's an extra garage. So when they're running behind this house, they ain't just running, they know there's a structure there. Why? Because we recorded it. We could be more accurate with our information, having these flights done more regularly, but maybe that goes to a cost thing now. That's something kind of to be discussed later, but in terms of privacy, it's kind of done everywhere. Same thing when you think of like Google Maps, Waves. We're not collecting any more data than them, that I can assure. Sorry, I rambled so long.
I just want to add, when it comes to privacy concerns, if you take out a building permit, I, as the assessor, even if you take out a building permit to put up a garage in your back or a deck, I, as the assessor, have the right to go onto your property, into your backyard, photograph, and measure that addition. This would allow me, in a lot of cases, to not have to do that and be able to collect the same information. I just kind of want to do, Jason, can you set where I can share my screen? So this right here is Bing Maps, right? And you can like make out the street signs, and of course I just screwed it up, but you can make out the street signs. This is our highest resolution pictometry, right? And you can't even make out the Cunningham Township, the words on the Cunningham Township sign. You know, but it's still good enough to measure this building, you know, from point to point. I mean, that's what my office is using it for, to measure buildings.
Any other discussion?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So William had said something about things being blurred out, and if you could expand on that a little bit.
It's not so much blurred out, it's just like it's not so much blurred out as the resolution isn't really good enough. This is me zooming in. Let me share again. I mean, the resolution just isn't good enough to make out words or letters. I mean, this sign in front of this is pretty good sized sign, and it's just not good enough. So it's not so much about it being blurred out. It's, you know, like, again, the resolution is good enough to measure buildings, right? But, you know, it's good enough to like figure out, like, say that this was the building of a business and they wanted to put up a billboard. You could measure how much area is on this wall, and if there is a size to area ratio, you could figure out, you know, what size billboard they could do.
Ms. Wu.
Yeah.
Okay. When I was speaking to Blurred Out, I was speaking because I know as a citizen, as a person who just sits outside, you're thinking, hey, if I'm standing in my yard and it fly over, am I going to be part of your software now? Your pictures, your photos, and those things. Like somewhere in their system, their algorithm, how it works out, those imageries are taken out. It's taking the camera angle from so many different angles, so many different photos at a time that it'll take out ones that we can't use, which are ones involving people. Now, if a car is in the driveway, we'll be able to see the make and model of the car. As Wayne showed you, like how the sign is, we won't be able to see the tag number or any of those type of things.
Now, when he says make and model, I think what he means is if you know cars, I can't tell the make and model of any of these cars in the parking lot.
Yes, if you can identify a car.
Any other comments? Grace?
So I think a lot of them, some of my questions were already addressed. I was wondering about alternatives, and it sounds like the alternative would be someone going out to properties and taking photos and measurements, and that's something that happens anyway. And this is kind of an alternative to doing that. Is that right?
Yes.
And that the Google Earth images and like drones or any other companies flying over taking images all the time that's publicly available is similar. William said it's not anything more than Google, but then I was thinking then, what's the purpose? But I guess that's what this orthogonal and oblique imaging is, the different angles. So you have a height measurement that you don't with Google Earth. Is that right?
Right. And I don't think that Google really lets you measure. I mean, I know they have I don't think they do. I mean, this software has measurement tools built in.
I see. And so I was wondering then about a policy, because I think it would be good to have, just a general policy about what the allowable or intended uses are, even just generally like measurements for the township or the city for assessment or planning purposes. And was wondering if there is anything else too, like if this is used for code or building enforcement or anything, or if it's just for measurement, planning, and assessment purposes.
Well, it could be used for all those things. My office only uses it for the assessment purposes. We recently shared it with the planning department, and they use it for planning things. And I'll be honest, I don't know.
Building safety. It sounds like building safety just today has been told about their access to it. So they haven't had an opportunity to even explore what, if anything, they would do with it.
So I guess logistically, is there a way that we could say, they could, if we need to do it before this flight, but like before we access the data, have a policy in place for how we use or share it? You think that sounds reasonable?
Is this a policy that you'd want to vote on? Or just have a policy in place?
I think some input would be good, like a presented to the public and the board kind of policy.
Sure. Yep.
Jaya.
I would just echo that. I think with talking about this technology, I'd like to see a policy of how it was being shared as well.
Okay.
Any other council member comments?
One final question. So you said that the county does one every 3 years. Is that right, Wayne?
This is my understanding. The GIS consortium.
Do you know what their cadence is? If it's 3 years, are we where they are in that?
They had a flight last year.
So they had a flight last year. Okay.
Any other council comments? Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve resolution number T 2021-11-014R. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
No.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes 6-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
With no further business before the Cunningham Town Board, this meeting is adjourned.